It was a warm and sunny afternoon at the local park, a place where families gathered to enjoy the day. The park was filled with laughter, the sound of children running around, and the soft chirping of birds in the trees. People were walking their dogs, playing catch, and sitting on benches enjoying the fresh air. Among the crowds, there was a little boy named Leo, a 7-year-old who was in a wheelchair. Leo loved coming to the park, but he had a hard time keeping up with the other children. His wheelchair made it difficult to move quickly through the crowded paths. As much as he wanted to join in the fun, the crowded pathways made it tough. His eyes sparkled with excitement, but his frustration grew as he tried to keep up with his friends who were already ahead, running and laughing. Leo's parents, Sarah and Tom, could see the struggle in his eyes. They had been looking forward to spending the day outside, but they also knew that outings like these weren't always easy for Leo. He was born with a condition that affected his ability to walk, so a wheelchair was necessary for him to get around. But even though Leo faced challenges, he was always excited about the idea of playing with his friends and experiencing the world like everyone else. Sarah gently encouraged Leo, telling him that he could still have fun, even if it was slower than his friends. But Leo could see his friends running off to the playground, laughing as they reached the swings, and his heart sank a little. He wanted to be with them, to feel like he was part of the group. "Maybe we should go a little slower today, Leo," Sarah said, trying to make him feel better. But Leo just sighed, staring at the crowd of children playing and wishing he could keep up. He felt a little left out, a little different. His parents tried their best to reassure him, but they knew it wasn't always easy for him to accept. As they slowly made their way toward the playground, it was clear that the path was full of people, some walking, others jogging, and some just stopping in the middle of the walkway to chat. It was tough to get through the crowd. Leo's wheelchair had to squeeze through tight spaces, and it often felt like they were stuck in a never-ending stream of people. It was at that moment that something surprising happened. From the corner of Leo's eye, he saw someone approaching. It was Mark, a security guard who worked at the park. Mark had seen Leo and his family several times before, always offering a friendly smile when he crossed paths with them. But today was different. Today, Mark saw something in Leo's eyes that made him stop and offer his help. Mark wasn't just a security guard. He was someone who genuinely cared about the people who came to the park. He had seen a lot of things, but this moment felt different. As Mark walked up to Leo and his parents, he could sense that they were struggling to navigate the busy park. Without hesitating, Mark smiled warmly and said, "Hi there, would you like a little help getting to the playground?" Leo looked up, a little surprised. He had never expected anyone to offer help so openly. His parents were taken aback as well, but they could see that Mark's offer was sincere. It was the kind of help they needed but never really asked for. Mark's offer would turn out to be the moment that changed the day for Leo and his family. As Mark's words sank in, Leo's parents exchanged a quick glance. They were both grateful for the offer, but didn't know what to say at first. They didn't want to seem like they couldn't handle the situation, but it was clear that Leo was having a tough time. The date was supposed to be fun, but instead, it was turning into a struggle for their son. Leo, sitting quietly in his wheelchair, looked up at Mark, then at his parents. He had been watching his friends running around, laughing and playing, and his heart ached a little. He wanted to be part of that. But every time they tried to make their way through the park, the path was filled with so many people. It felt like they were constantly stopping and starting, trying to squeeze through tiny spaces in the crowd. Leo couldn't help but feel like he was missing out. "Maybe it'll be easier if we go around this way," Mark suggested, pointing to a less crowded path. It was a small change, but it seemed like it could make a big difference. Sarah smiled at Mark's kindness and nodded, thankful for the suggestion. They began to follow Mark down the new path, and it was clear that Leo was starting to feel a little better. The route was much less crowded, with only a few families sitting on benches, enjoying the quiet. It was much easier for Leo to move, and he didn't have to worry about bumping into anyone. The space felt open, and the air was fresher, making it easier for him to relax. As they continued on their way, Leo's parents felt a weight lift off their shoulders. They hadn't realized how much stress they were carrying until it was gone. Leo's smile started to return, and his eyes brightened as he looked ahead. His parents exchanged a relieved look. Maybe this day wouldn't be so hard after all. But the path wasn't the only thing that changed. Mark had an easy way about him, a calm, friendly presence that helped everyone feel more at ease. He spoke to Leo, asking him about his favorite games and what he liked to do in the park. Leo, who had been feeling a bit discouraged, began to open up. He talked about how much he liked the swings, how his friends always played on them, and how he wished he could join them without any trouble. "You know," Mark said with a friendly grin, "I think the swings might be waiting for you too. Let's go have some fun." Leo couldn't help but giggle a little. For the first time that day, he felt like he might actually have a chance to enjoy himself. His parents, too, felt their worries fade as they realized that sometimes all it took was a kind gesture to make a big difference. Mark wasn't just helping Leo move through the park. He was helping him feel like he belonged, like he was just another kid who could play and have fun. When they reached the playground, Leo's excitement grew even more. The swings were in sight, and it was no longer just a dream. It felt real now. Mark, still smiling, helped Leo out of his wheelchair and gently placed him in one of the swings. "Enjoy yourself, buddy," Mark said as Leo's face lit up with joy. Leo's parents watched, touched by the kindness and how Mark had made a simple outing into a day they would never forget. Little did they know, this moment would spark something even bigger, a wave of kindness that would touch everyone around them. As Leo soared through the air on the swing, his laughter filled the park. The joy on his face was undeniable, and for the first time that day, he felt completely free. The worries that had weighed him down earlier melted away. With each gentle push, Leo felt lighter, his heart filling with happiness. His parents watched from a nearby bench, their hearts full of gratitude for Mark, the kind guard who had made this possible. Mark stood nearby, his job as a security guard still in the back of his mind. But at that moment, he was more focused on Leo's happiness than anything else. Watching Leo's face light up was worth everything. He had seen many people in the park, but something about helping this little boy felt different. It wasn't just about assisting. It was about making a difference, even in a small way. Mark was just happy to see Leo enjoy the day the way he deserved. For Leo's parents, this was a turning point. They had always tried to create a life full of love and support for their son, but sometimes the challenges felt overwhelming. They didn't always know how to make things easier for Leo when the world around them seemed so busy and crowded. But Mark had found a way. He had seen their struggle and stepped in without a second thought. It wasn't just the physical help that meant so much. It was the emotional support too. It reminded them that they weren't alone in their journey. Leo's dad, Tom, leaned over to Sarah and whispered, "I can't believe how kind he is. It's not often you come across someone like that." Sarah nodded, her eyes still watching Mark as he stood off to the side, his watchful eyes scanning the area. "He's just doing his job, but it feels like so much more," she said softly. "I think he really sees Leo." Just as they were talking, Mark walked over to them. He didn't rush. He moved at a steady pace, as though he had all the time in the world. When he reached them, he smiled and gave a small nod to Leo, who was still happily swinging. "I'm glad to see he's enjoying himself," Mark said warmly. "I know the park can get crowded, and sometimes it's hard to find space for someone who needs it. I hope this helped." Tom and Sarah both smiled, feeling the deep sense of appreciation. They had tried to keep their concerns to themselves, but it was hard to ignore the tension that had built up before Mark offered his help. Now things were different. The park no longer felt like a maze of obstacles, but rather a place where they could simply enjoy their time as a family. "He's really enjoying this," "Thank you," Sarah said with sincerity. "It's more than we expected today." Mark nodded again, his expression full of kindness. "It's no trouble at all," he said. "It's what I'm here for." Just as Mark turned to walk away, Sarah called out, "Wait, would you like to join us for a coffee? You've made today so special for us. We'd love to thank you properly." Mark smiled, a little surprised but pleased by the invitation. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I should get back to my post. Maybe another time." With that, Mark gave a small wave and turned to head back toward his duties. Leo's parents watched him go, still feeling the warmth of his gesture. As Mark disappeared into the crowd, it was clear that something had changed in that moment. It wasn't just about helping a child. It was about creating a connection that would stay with everyone involved long after the day was over. Leo continued to swing, his joy still evident, while his parents quietly whispered their thanks to each other. Little did they know, the impact of this moment would soon reach beyond just their family. The park was about to witness something beautiful. As the day went on, the park seemed to come alive in a different way. Leo continued to enjoy the swing, laughing with every push, his face glowing with happiness. His parents watched him with smiles of their own, but their thoughts kept returning to Mark. It wasn't just the help he had offered, it was the kindness and care he had shown. It was rare to find someone who took the time to notice the little things, to see beyond the surface, and offer help without being asked. Mark, meanwhile, continued his rounds in the park. He was doing his job, but his mind kept drifting back to Leo and his family. He had been a security guard for a few years now, and while he had seen his fair share of busy days, today felt different. Today, he had made a connection with a family. And it wasn't just about his job anymore. It was about making sure that Leo's day was as good as it could be. As Mark walked past Leo and his family again, he couldn't help but notice how much fun Leo was having. The little boy was swinging higher now, his laughter filling the air, and Mark's heart swelled with happiness. He had made a difference in their day, and that was enough for him. But then something unexpected happened. Leo's mom, Sarah, stood up and waved at Mark. "Hey, Mark," she called. "Thank you again for helping us earlier. It really means a lot to us." Mark paused, turning to face her. He was surprised but smiled warmly. "It was no trouble at all. I'm glad Leo's enjoying himself," he replied. "We're enjoying it too," Sarah said with a grin. "But I wanted to ask if you'd like to sit with us for a few minutes. Maybe have a break. I think we owe you a little something for all the kindness you've shown." Mark felt a little uncomfortable at first. He was just doing his job, after all, but Sarah's genuine smile made him hesitate. He wasn't used to people offering him anything in return for simply doing what he thought was right. After a moment's thought, he nodded. "I'd be happy to join you for a little while. Thanks for the offer." Sarah led him to the bench where Tom was sitting, and they all settled down together. Leo, still swinging with joy, looked over at the group, his eyes shining with excitement. He had no idea what was going on but was happy to see his parents talking with the kind man who had helped him earlier. As they sat down, Sarah offered Mark a bottle of water. "Here, it's a hot day. You must be thirsty," she said. Mark took the water gratefully, feeling a little embarrassed by the attention, but also grateful for the kind gesture. "Thank you. It's not often I get a chance to just sit down and chat during my shift." Tom, who had been quiet up until this point, nodded. "You've made such a big difference today, Mark. I don't think you'll ever know how much it means to us." Mark smiled, shrugging modestly. "I'm just happy to help out when I can. Seeing Leo so happy is reward enough." The small moment of conversation felt natural and easy. Mark wasn't a stranger anymore. He was someone who had shared a special moment with their family. For Sarah and Tom, it was a reminder that sometimes kindness could be found in the most unexpected places. Mark had gone beyond his job to make their day easier, and that simple act had meant more than words could express. Little did Mark know, this simple gesture was about to turn into something bigger. The ripples of his kindness were just beginning to spread, and the entire park was about to see the impact of what a small act of caring could do. As Sarah, Tom, and Mark continued to talk on the bench, Leo's laughter echoed through the park, louder than ever. The simple joy of being able to swing and enjoy the playground had made all the difference for him. His parents couldn't remember the last time he'd had such a carefree moment. Watching their son's face light up with happiness, they couldn't help but feel grateful to Mark for helping make this day possible. The conversation with Mark continued naturally. Tom, who had initially been quiet, now felt comfortable enough to talk more openly. "You know, we've taken Leo to the park many times, but today, it just feels different," he said. "It's like we're really able to enjoy the day for the first time in a while." Sarah nodded, her heart full of appreciation. "It's because of you, Mark. You've done so much more than just help us get through the crowds. You've made Leo feel like he's part of the park, part of the fun." Mark smiled humbly, but inside, he felt a warmth he wasn't used to. It wasn't often that someone took the time to thank him so sincerely. He was just doing his job after all, but hearing their words made him feel like he had done something truly meaningful. Leo, still swinging higher and higher, suddenly looked up at the sky, his face filled with wonder. He turned to his parents and called out, "Mom, Dad, I'm flying." The joy in his voice was impossible to miss, and it made everyone around him smile. Mark's heart swelled with emotion. He had helped make this moment happen, and that realization filled him with pride. Seeing a child like Leo so happy, so carefree, was the kind of reward he had never expected. But the moment didn't end there. As Leo swung back and forth, more families nearby began to notice the scene. Some stopped to watch, others smiled, and a few even took out their phones to capture the beautiful moment. It was impossible not to notice the simple but powerful gesture of kindness that had led to this joy. Soon, a few people began to clap, their applause gentle at first, but growing louder. At first, it was just a small group of people, maybe 5 or 6, but as word spread, more and more people gathered around. Mark wasn't sure what was happening at first, but as he looked around, he saw people's faces filled with warmth and admiration. It wasn't just the parents and Leo who were moved. It was everyone who had witnessed this small act of kindness. Sarah and Tom exchanged surprised glances, not fully understanding why the crowd had gathered. But as the clapping continued, they began to realize something. Mark's act of kindness had touched not only their family, but everyone around them. The applause wasn't just for Leo's happiness, but for Mark, the security guard who had seen their struggle and stepped in without hesitation. Leo, still swinging, turned to see the crowd clapping for him. His smile grew even wider, a mixture of excitement and surprise. He had never felt so special, so noticed. The moment was overwhelming. For Sarah and Tom, it felt like their worries had been lifted in an instant. It wasn't just about the swing or the path through the park. It was about the connection they had made with Mark and the kindness that had spread so unexpectedly. The entire park, in that one moment, had become a place of compassion, a place where kindness was not only noticed but celebrated. As the clapping continued, Mark felt a bit shy, but he couldn't deny the deep sense of satisfaction he felt inside. This wasn't just a job for him anymore. It was a reminder of how powerful small acts of kindness could be. What started as a simple gesture had turned into something truly unforgettable. The park, once just a place to visit, had become a symbol of connection and care. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling of warmth it created lingered in the air. The crowd that had gathered to watch the moment of kindness dispersed, but their hearts had been touched. It wasn't just the cheering that made this moment special. It was the ripple effect that began to spread across the park. As the families walked away, some couldn't help but smile, thinking about how such a small act had brightened their day. Others whispered to each other about the security guard who had helped the disabled child, and how it was a simple reminder that kindness mattered more than anything else. Mark had no idea that his small gesture had started something bigger. Leo continued to swing, his face still beaming with joy. His parents, now sitting on the bench next to each other, exchanged quiet words. They were both moved by the way the crowd had responded, and neither of them could believe the emotional impact this moment had created. To them, it had been just a regular day at the park, one filled with its usual challenges. But with Mark's help, it had turned into something extraordinary. "I never thought something like this would happen," Sarah said, still in awe of what had just occurred. "Just a simple offer to help, and look at how it's affected everyone." Tom nodded. "It's unbelievable. Sometimes we get so caught up in the struggles that we forget how powerful a small act of kindness can be." As they sat and watched Leo swing, they could hear people around them talking about the moment. Some praised Mark's willingness to step in, while others mentioned how they had never expected to see such a touching scene unfold in a public place. Word had spread quickly, and it seemed like the entire park had taken notice of what had happened. People from all corners of the park had witnessed something special. A couple sitting on a nearby bench smiled at each other. "You know," one of them said, "it really made me think about how easy it is to help others. We get so caught up in our own world sometimes, we forget that a little kindness goes a long way." A man jogging past slowed his pace and waved at Sarah and Tom. "You've got a great kid there," he said with a smile. "And that guard, he's the kind of person we need more of in this world." Sarah and Tom exchanged a surprised glance. They hadn't expected to hear such kind words from strangers, but it made them feel proud. Proud of their son, proud of the kindness that had been shown, and proud that others were also taking notice. Mark, who had returned to his post and was walking through the park, couldn't help but notice the change in the atmosphere. The energy in the park felt different. People seemed more connected, more aware of one another. Even though he had walked away from the scene, the impact of his actions had already spread, and it was clear that the day had turned into something more than just a casual visit to the park. It was as if a wave of kindness had washed over the entire park, and everyone who had witnessed it was now carrying that energy with them. The simple act of helping a child had turned into a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could make a lasting impact. As Leo's laughter echoed again, louder and clearer, Sarah and Tom looked at each other with a sense of peace. The day had turned out to be much more than they had ever expected. What had started as a challenge had blossomed into a moment of connection, not just for their family, but for everyone around them. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting the golden glow over the park, Sarah and Tom continued to watch their son, Leo, swing higher and higher. His laughter still rang out in the air, and his face was bright with the joy of simply being free. It was a feeling they hadn't seen in a long time, and it made them both feel a deep sense of gratitude. The scene around them had quieted down, but the energy of kindness still hung in the air. Sarah leaned her head against Tom's shoulder, and for the first time that day, they both felt a sense of peace wash over them. It was as if the world had slowed down, giving them a moment to just be together and appreciate what they had. "We never expected something like this," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Just a little help, and everything changed. Leo's having the time of his life, and I can't believe how much that means to me." Tom nodded, his eyes focused on Leo, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about how many times they had struggled with the challenges of raising a child with a disability. How many times had they felt alone in their journey? How many times had they wished for someone to step in and help, even in the smallest way? And now, here they were, witnessing a simple act of kindness that had turned their day around. "I don't think we'll ever forget this," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not just about Leo enjoying the park. It's about everything that happened today. That guard, Mark, he did more than just help us. He made us feel seen, like we weren't invisible." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she thought about everything they had been through. Raising Leo had never been easy, but moments like this made all the challenges worth it. It wasn't about the struggles or the obstacles. It was about the people who showed up, even in small ways, to make a difference. And Mark had done that. As Sarah wiped away a stray tear, Tom gently took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. They had always been a team, but today, something had shifted. They realized how much kindness could change not just a day, but a life. They weren't just parents trying to make the best of a tough situation anymore. They were part of a bigger story, a story of connection and support that had been sparked by a single act of care. Leo, still swinging and enjoying himself, turned to look at his parents. "Mom, Dad, look how high I can go," he shouted excitedly, pointing to the sky. His voice was filled with pride, and for a moment, it seemed like he was flying. Sarah and Tom smiled through their tears, both of them overwhelmed with love for their son. They were so grateful that he was able to experience this simple joy, something they hadn't been sure would happen today. But here he was, smiling and laughing like any other child, feeling just like the other kids at the park. "We see you, Leo," Sarah whispered, her heart full. "We see you, and we're so proud of you." The tears that had been welling up in her eyes weren't just from gratitude. They were tears of relief, of joy, and of knowing that there was kindness in the world, even when it seemed hard to find. Mark had made all the difference, and they would never forget how he had helped turn their day around. As the last rays of sunlight bathed the park, Sarah and Tom knew that this moment would stay with them forever. It was a moment that proved how powerful kindness could be, how it could change lives, and how it could bring people together, even in the most unexpected ways. And as Leo swung higher into the sky, it felt like everything was exactly as it should be. As the day came to a close, the park began to quiet down. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass. Leo's laughter still echoed in the distance, a reminder of how much fun he had enjoyed. His parents, now sitting on the bench, watched him with full hearts. It was hard to believe how much had changed in just a few hours. As Sarah and Tom reflected on the events of the day, they couldn't help but think back to the moment when Mark had first offered his help. At that time, they had simply seen it as a small gesture, a kind man offering a little assistance. But now they understood that it had been much more. Mark's simple kindness had turned their challenging day into one filled with joy and hope. It was a reminder that the world still had goodness in it, and that sometimes a small act of compassion could make all the difference. "I keep thinking about how we almost let the crowd ruin our day," Sarah said, her voice thoughtful. "We were so focused on the difficulty of it all, we forgot to see the simple joys, like Leo laughing and playing with his friends." Tom nodded, his hand resting gently on Sarah's. "It's easy to get lost in the challenges. But today, we've learned something. We've learned that there's always room for kindness, even when things don't seem easy." Sarah smiled at him, appreciating his words. It had been a long time since they had felt this kind of peace. For so long, they had been caught in the whirlwind of daily struggles, trying to navigate the world with a child who had special needs. But today, they had learned to take a step back, to see the kindness around them, and to remember that there was beauty in even the most unexpected moments. As they sat there, watching Leo continue to swing, a few more people walked past them, smiling and giving nods of recognition. It seemed as if the energy of the day had rubbed off on everyone. They could hear snippets of conversation, people talking about the kind security guard who had helped the family, about the small gesture that had turned into something much bigger. One woman, who had been sitting on a bench nearby, approached Sarah and Tom. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I saw what happened today. It really touched me. It reminded me that we can all make a difference, no matter how small the act." Sarah was a bit surprised but grateful. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "It really does make a difference, doesn't it?" The woman nodded, smiling warmly. "It does. And sometimes we just need to remember that kindness is everywhere, even in the busiest places." As the woman walked away, Sarah and Tom exchanged a glance. It was clear that Mark's kindness had spread far beyond their family. The whole park had witnessed a simple act of compassion, and it had left a lasting impression on everyone. Leo finally finished with the swing, rolled over to them with a big smile on his face. "That was so much fun," he exclaimed. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Sarah and Tom laughed, their hearts full. "Of course we can, buddy. Of course." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the park, they knew that this day would stay with them forever. It wasn't just about the swing or the playground. It was about the kindness they had experienced, the kindness that had touched not only their lives but the lives of everyone around them. And as they walked out of the park, hand in hand, they felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had come to the park expecting an ordinary day, but they had left with something much more, a reminder that kindness, even in small forms, could make the world a better place. As Sarah and Tom walked through the park with Leo, the soft crunch of gravel beneath their shoes seemed to echo the peace in their hearts. The day had started out like any other, filled with the usual struggles and challenges, but it had turned into something far more meaningful. It wasn't just the playground that made it special, it was the kindness, the compassion, and the connections that had been made. The crowd had dispersed, but the sense of warmth remained. People who had witnessed Mark's kind gesture were still walking around, carrying with them a little spark of hope and gratitude. Sarah and Tom could see the change in the air. There was a sense of togetherness, a reminder that even in a busy park filled with strangers, kindness had the power to bring people together. Leo, who had been quiet for a few moments, looked up at his parents and smiled. "I'm really happy today," he said simply, his voice full of sincerity. Tom's heart swelled with emotion at his son's words. "We're happy too, buddy," he said, ruffling Leo's hair. Today was a good day. As they made their way to the exit of the park, Sarah couldn't help but glance back one last time. It was hard to leave, but she knew they would carry the memory of this day with them for a long time. The swing, the laughter, and the kindness, they were all intertwined, creating a moment that would forever be a part of their lives. "I'll never forget this," Sarah said softly, more to herself than anyone else. It wasn't just the swing. It was everything that happened today. Mark's help, the way the crowd reacted. It was all so much more than we ever expected. Tom nodded. It was a reminder of how much good there is in the world. Sometimes we forget that. But today, we saw it. They reached the park's gate, and as they stepped out into the street, Sarah felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. The day had been hard at first, but now it was filled with memories of joy and kindness. She realized that even when things felt difficult, there was always room for moments of connection and hope. On their way home, Sarah and Tom talked more about what had happened. They reflected on the kindness they had experienced, not just from Mark, but from the entire park. People had come together to celebrate something simple, yet profound: the power of helping one another. They knew that this experience would stay with them for a long time, shaping how they looked at the world from now on. Later that evening, as Sarah tucked Leo into bed, she leaned down to kiss his forehead. "You had a good day, didn't you?" she asked softly. Leo nodded, his eyes already half closed with sleep. "Yeah, Mom. It was the best day ever." Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of her gratitude. "I'm so glad, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so glad." As she turned off the light and left the room, Sarah and Tom exchanged a quiet look. This day, with all its unexpected moments of kindness, had reminded them of something important: that no matter how tough life could be, there would always be opportunities for kindness, and those moments were worth cherishing. Today had been more than just a day at the park. It had been a reminder that even the smallest gestures can create lasting memories, memories that stay with us forever.